The US and its allies are banning Russian oil, but not Russian uranium, which it turns out the US needs even more. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. This episode is sponsored by Incognity. You probably know that companies are collecting your personal data, but you may not realize just how many. Dozens, maybe hundreds, most of which you've never heard of, and you have no idea what they're doing with your data. Incognity helps you stop them. I'll explain more at the end. So, the West wants to punish Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. It slapped sanctions targeting Russian oil and gold, among other things. These sanctions didn't come easy since the West is dependent on Russian energy. We're kind of waking up to just how bad economic dependence on Russia can be. This must be how folks felt when they found out smoking was bad for you. Really? Smoking? Bad for me. Well, at least I can have sugar, caffeine, and leeches. What's that, Shelley? Those aren't good for me either? Can I have nothing? Meanwhile, Russia slapped back with sanctions of its own on natural gas, which definitely was a blow to Europe, though it's not as harsh as Putin's insults saying Western leaders look disgusting topless. I mean, that's just savage, because it's true. No one wants to see Boris Johnson shirtless, not even Mrs. Boris. Anyway, we're putting up with a lot to punish Russia. But there's one resource that nobody wants to touch. Russian uranium. The US thought about it. The Biden administration considered sanctioning Russia's top atomic energy company, Rosatom. That company was formed by Russian President Vladimir Putin in 2007, and it controls Russia's uranium production. It produces nearly 20% of the world's nuclear fuel. So Rosatom is a state-owned company that controls all of Russia's uranium. It's a great source of income for Putin. So it would make sense that the U.S. would sanction it, right? U.S. President Joe Biden thought sanctions made sense too, until he backed out. The nuclear industry isn't too keen about sanctioning Russia, because as it turns out, Russia dominates the world's nuclear power supply chains. According to Columbia University, Russia accounted for nearly 40% of global uranium conversion services in 2020, and a 46% share of global uranium enrichment capacity in 2018. This is despite the fact that Russia only mines 6% of the uranium produced worldwide, which kind of makes sense. Despite having less than 1% of the leaders in the world, Russia accounts for 99.9% of topless political figures on horse picks. Europe especially depends on Russia for uranium, not topless political figures on horse picks. 20% of Europe's nuclear energy comes from uranium produced by Russia. Some countries, like Hungary and Slovakia, even depend on Russian nuclear fuel for half their energy. They need it so much that they're willing to allow Russian planes to fly in despite EU bans. Man, it must suck being so dependent on something you're willing to look the other way on atrocities committed by a country run by a brutal dictator. Glad none of us know what that feels like, assuming you're not watching this on a device made in China. If you're asking, why doesn't the U.S. just produce and trade more of its own uranium? Good for you! If only American leaders thought about it sooner. Because at this point, getting away from Russian uranium and nuclear technology isn't easy. I'll explain after the break. Welcome back. The West depends on Russia for a lot of things. Oil, fertilizer, wheat, 80s movie villains, you name it. The West is willing to put sanctions on a lot of these things, but Russian uranium isn't one of them. For one, it's a lot cheaper to import uranium from Russia. I mean, you can get uranium on Amazon, because of course you can. But this isn't practical, because who wants to pay for a Prime membership? On top of that, Russia is the only commercial supplier of the type of uranium needed to fuel newer reactor designs. Countries that want to go carbon-free can't go Russia-free because of this. This includes the U.S. 16% of America's nuclear power plants are powered by Russian uranium. It's almost half if you include Russian allies like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. This wasn't always the case. The U.S. used to be a huge producer of uranium, starting in the 1950s. But that changed in the 1980s. Practically everything is imported now. Part of it is thanks to the flood of high-quality, low-cost uranium, especially from Canada and Australia in the 1970s. Uranium is Canada and Australia's #1 export to America, besides hunks. There was also a lot of domestic backlash against nuclear energy after the 1979 meltdown of a reactor at 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania. Then after the Cold War, Russia entered the market. After the fall of the Soviet Union, the U.S. and Russia signed an agreement to dismantle Russian nuclear weapons and turn them into energy for U.S. nuclear reactors. This was part of a megatons to megawatts program that lasted from 1993 to 2013. It had to be a pretty sweet victory for every American who lived through the Cold War. You spent years terrified of Russian nukes, and they wound up powering your plug-in neon American flag, USA! Since then, uranium imports from Russia have been limited, even before the Ukraine invasion. But that hasn't stopped the U.S. from putting too many eggs into the basket of Russia and its allies. Since Biden backed off from outright banning Russian uranium, there has been pressure from Congress to do just that.
We cannot be reliant on Russia for anything, and certainly not for uranium. Now is the time for the United States to stop buying Russian uranium. Now is the time for us to ramp up domestic uranium production.
Does that mean we're finally getting ourselves an Amazon Prime membership? And Biden is listening. Well, no, he's not looking at banning Russian uranium. He's doing what he does best. Spend money! He wants more than $4 billion to wean the U.S. off Russian uranium. $4 billion? Man, Russian uranium is even harder to wean off than cigarettes. Probably because wearing a uranium patch would just give you radiation poisoning. The proposal aims to spur development of more domestic enrichment and other steps needed to turn uranium into reactor fuel. This money would be used to buy enriched uranium directly from domestic producers. The U.S. has plenty of uranium, especially in the western U.S., and 2 different bills have been introduced to pursue research and development of the type of enriched uranium only Russia has. But it could take years to expand U.S. uranium production, because the U.S. only has 1 commercial uranium enrichment facility in New Mexico. On top of that, the U.S. government also has to work out how companies would obtain permits for mining operations. That won't come easy because of environmental concerns. And Native American tribes aren't too happy with having any of that on their lands. Too bad the U.S. can't power nuclear reactors with Canadian and Australian hunks. Mainly because with power this hot, there's no way you could cool it down. But if the U.S. can somehow find a way to mine more uranium and create the kind only Russia has, America would have a huge edge that can help the rest of the world become less reliant on authoritarian countries like Russia. Because they're the worst type of leeches. And this episode has been sponsored by Incognity. Whenever you do anything online, there's a huge number of companies that collect your personal data. Your name, your email, your home address, your social security number, your employment history, all sorts of things. What are they doing with your data? They're buying it, selling it, and trading it like you're a commodity. If all they do is use it to sell you products, you're lucky. Some of them use it to adjust your credit score, or potentially more nefarious things. And if any of those companies get hacked, you could be in big trouble. For example, last year, hackers got into LinkedIn. They stole the private data of 700 million users and put it up for sale on the dark web. That included users' names, phone numbers, and profile data. That's pretty scary. And if LinkedIn can be hacked, so can all the smaller companies that buy and sell your data. This is why I signed up for Incognity. It showed me 76 data brokers that potentially had my private information. Incognity forces these companies to delete your data. There are laws that allow you to do this, but if you want to do it yourself, you'd have to figure out the applicable laws, write letters in a specific legal way, and follow up to make sure your instructions are followed. Incognity handles this for you. 3 months after signing up, Incognity had already gotten my details removed from 19 of these data brokers, with 35 more in progress. And I didn't have to do anything after signing up. So check out Incognity using the link below, or go to incognity.com/uncovered. The first 100 people to use the code UNCOVERED will get 20% off. Get your personal data off the market with Incognity. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.